If you're going to mediation soon or you have clients who are, consider pre-mediation coaching with us at High Conflict Institute. This is a brand new service we're providing, and here's why. Most people are unsure what will happen in mediation and how to prepare for it, especially in a high conflict mediation. Studies show that regardless of the skill level of your mediator, learning a few key conflict resolution skills can increase your success of settling your matter out of court. Our pre-mediation coach will work with you in a 90-minute one-on-one session by Zoom or phone to help you learn to stay calm, to make reasonable proposals, and make decisions that can last. A small investment with significant positive outcomes. Schedule your pre-mediation coaching session on our website at the link below in the show notes, or call us at 619-800-2070. If you're a lawyer, mediator, or other professional and want more info, just ask us at highconflictinstitute.com on our contact page, or feel free to provide the coaching link directly to your clients today. Welcome to It's All Your Fault on True Story FM, the one and only podcast focused on high conflict human interactions, which usually involves someone with a high conflict personality. I'm Megan Hunter, here with Bill Eddy.
Hi, everybody.
We are the co-founders of the High Conflict Institute in San Diego, California. In this episode, we'll talk about the high conflict personality theory that Bill created many years ago. But first, a couple of quick notes. If you have a question for our Q&A sessions about your high conflict situation, send them to podcast@highconflictinstitute.com or on our website at highconflictinstitute.com/podcast, where you'll also find the show notes and links. Please give us a rate or review and tell a friend about us, especially if they're dealing with a high conflict situation. We're very, very grateful, and we're so glad you're listening. So let's talk about the high conflict personality theory. This is something that you came up with, Bill, and it's really been the foundation and the formation of everything we do at High Conflict Institute, and it's really been your life's work. So we're all ears to hear about how it, the genesis of it and how it's developed over the years.
Well, thank you for that. It really, I think, began for me in the 1990s when I became a family lawyer after being a therapist for 12 years. And in family court, I kept hearing about high conflict families. And I started reading, and the books starting in about the 1980s started talking about high conflict families and how they don't resolve their disputes. They just keep going. And I, because of my training in clinical social work, believe this isn't a family that's high conflict. It's a person. It's their personality. And I had been trained in personality disorders in 1980 when I was in training to become a clinical social worker. And the thing is, personalities are individual. Somebody has a personality. We all have a personality. And that personality disorders have some fundamental characteristics. The first and biggest one is it's an enduring pattern of behavior, which means the person keeps going. And that's what personalities are for all of us. Our personality is kind of the way you think, how you manage your feelings, how you behave. And when you see somebody you haven't seen for 10 years, they may look a little different, maybe a different color hair or less hair, things like that, but they're still the same personality. There isn't a big change, although people do change their personalities some. But people with personality disorders have a narrow range, an enduring pattern of this behavior, and some key characteristics. They have cognitive distortions, that they see things in more all or nothing terms. They jump to conclusions. They have emotional reasoning. And I work with clients in the psychiatric hospital with personality disorders. Whenever there's a problem, I had to solve, like their spouse was going to kick them out, and I had to help them find new housing, or their boss was thinking of firing them, and I worked hard to help them keep their job. And it's like every day there was a new crisis, that because they were so rigid, that they kept bumping against other people. So the cognitive distortions, an affective quality, which is emotions, that the emotions were out of proportion to the situation. So maybe I was 5 minutes late getting to the hospital to meet with my client who's residential there for a couple weeks. And they're like, why are you late? You abandoned me. How could you do such a thing? And so I learned to expect exaggerated emotions and cognitive distortions. But also, one of the big characteristics was interpersonal dysfunction. And different from depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, all those other disorders, personality disorders were interpersonal disorders. So they affect the people around them, often in negative ways. And so I started thinking what they're calling in family court high conflict families is really personality disorders or traits of people with these personality difficulties. And so I wanted to talk about behavior, of course, but there's this collection of behavior that I could recognize so easily. And I knew, like in family court, the judge is saying, sir, I don't understand why you keep doing this thing that sabotages your parenting time. I'm going to have to take more parenting time away because you keep doing this thing. Or, ma'am, you keep, saying things to your child that are really harmful. And I've lectured you on that before, and you keep doing it. Why is that? So I started teaching courts and lawyers and therapists, and eventually we started teaching human resources. Rather than saying this person has a personality disorder, is this person has a pattern of high conflict behavior. It's not a diagnosis, and it helps people be practical, is focus on behavior, and you can try to make behavior change. But for background, it helps to understand personality disorders really are different and may be, 10% of adults in the world. And the latest diagnostic manual says about 10% of people, according to several national studies. And so I tried to teach people that with these high conflict personality, because I made the focus personality. And people say, did I come up with that term? And I think some people may have used personality, but they mostly talked about high conflict families. I'm the one, I think, that made high conflict personality the focus of attention, and the term HCP. And so for better or worse, people associate me with high conflict personality and HCP. So that's a little background, is the connection with mental health and using mental health techniques to help manage these folks and maybe even help them resolve disputes and maybe even help them get better.
I think that's really key, Bill, because, we've had conversations with a lot of people who have, said that, perhaps they, we shouldn't be labeling people. This is labeling people, that, it's very demonizing. And, the longer I do the work, the deeper it sinks in that this is truly this pattern of behavior. It is sort of a personality. It's a personality. And I'm not saying it should be in the DSM-5. Maybe it should, but it shouldn't. I'm teasing. But it is. I guess the important part is to really have an understanding that because they have this pattern of behavior, it requires everyone else to do things differently, right? Because they are programmed with a different set of rules that govern their operating system, so to speak. And I think it's so hard for many to really let that sink in and grasp that in their minds, that you have to do something different. When something doesn't go as expected, when something doesn't go their way, when it doesn't go according to the rules of their operating system, they're going to go into that pattern, right? That pattern of behavior of all or nothing thinking, unmanaged emotions, extreme behaviors, and blaming. That automatic. I've coined a term, I think, that you put in my mind a few weeks ago about the automatic, what is it? Automatic first thought?
Oh, automatic negative
thoughts.
The ants.
Well, I translated that into automatic blaming thought. Right? And that's what the high conflict person does. So things don't go their way. They automatically blame, automatically go into all or nothing. It's just, that's how it happens. And it's how they operate. And so it behooves the rest of us, number one, to help ourselves know how to we need to know how to manage this. It will bring down our stress and bring up our confidence. Number two, it's like unlocking a secret or kind of a key to help people that no one else is able to help. Right? And that, I think, is where a lot of people get this backwards. They might get stuck on, oh, you shouldn't use the word personality, or, oh, personality disorders. That's intense. That's serious. And yes, it is. But if nothing else is helping, why not give this a try? And don't get hung up on the label. Get hung up on the behaviors and what you can do differently so that you can help a person that is not going to be helped by anyone else.
You're absolutely right with that. And I think the key about labeling is, don't tell somebody you think they're a high conflict person or they have a personality disorder. But in your back of your mind, say, this person may be a high conflict person, which isn't a diagnosis. They may or may not have a personality disorder. That doesn't matter. It's the pattern of behavior. And so this person may have that. Therefore, I should adapt what I do. And that's the key. And I see so many people get frustrated, go, I don't know why you're doing this, and can't you just cut it out? And if they realize this is the person's personality, they lack self-awareness, they're unlikely to change, especially in your single conversation, it would bring so much peace to the world. There's so much people yelling at each other about things that aren't going to change, or they're not going to change that way. And that's where, like, empathy, attention, and respect, that technique that we use so much of the time really came from therapy and counseling. And in a lot of ways, this is parallel to helping people with alcoholism or addiction, is we don't judge them, but we don't let them drive. And that's the key, is don't judge high conflict people, but don't put them in charge of your life. That's where the trouble really comes.
Exactly. Now, are people with high conflict personalities typically diagnosed with a personality disorder or not?
Yeah, well, they're rarely, because one thing about personality disorders is generally they're not diagnosed. People, someone goes to a doctor and says, I'm depressed, can you help me? And the doctor asks some questions. Yep, you fit depression, and I've got some medication or counseling for you. People with personality disorders lack self-awareness of their impact on others and of their personality disorder. So they don't go to the doctor and say, hey, you have a personality disorder? They go to the doctor and say, can you help me deal with my nagging wife or my obnoxious husband? It's not about them. And so it's rare that people get this diagnosis. And that's why we recommend that you notice patterns of behavior and adapt what you do, because you're not going to be operating from a diagnosis, and that may never come. But in court, presenting patterns of behavior, and human resources, noticing patterns of behavior, this is what to deal with. It's not judgmental. And that's, people worry that I'm labeling people. I'm educating people, but I don't label an individual. And that's so important. I keep that to myself. I go, okay, this person may be a high conflict person. I'm not going to give that criticism I was thinking of giving. Things like that.
Right. One last question. Is it all, everyone with a personality disorder, whether diagnosed or not diagnosed, are all of them high conflict?
No, I'd say maybe half. And what's interesting, the DSM, the manual, has cluster A, cluster B, cluster C. And it's the cluster B personality disorders And I'll mention it's narcissistic, borderline, antisocial, and histrionic. Those are the ones most associated with high conflict behavior. They may be very comfortable in conflict. And we see, like in court cases, when the case is coming to an end, they try to find something else to keep it going. It's like there's a comfort. They're not happy, but there's a familiarity with conflict. And so that's a characteristic. And we have tips for managing each of those personalities. But a lot of people, even people with borderline, narcissistic, antisocial, histrionic personalities, some are not high conflict people. They don't have a target of blame. They just, create difficulty for themselves. And it's so sad. They generally don't have friends. They're generally not happy. The methods they use don't work, but they can't see their part in the problem. They don't connect the dots. So I think our goal with the high conflict personality theory is to help people understand and do what will be helpful for the people around the person and the person themselves.
It's a game changer. So thank you, Bill. That was a great explanation. And for anyone listening, I hope this has been helpful. It's just understanding that high conflict personality will help you so very much. And just remember, don't be judgmental about it. Don't tell someone you think they're high conflict. Don't tell them you think they have a personality disorder. Just keep those to yourselves. We call it a private working theory, right? It is a game changer because, like I said before, we just don't know what to do. We typically, kind of run into brick walls and dead ends when dealing with someone with a high conflict personality because we just don't know what to do. And so what we do and everything we teach at High Conflict Institute is about learning to do things differently, learning to stop yourself before, going down that path of ending up in a big argument or, kind of just getting very, very upset or feeling like you have failed. And you don't have to feel that way. And that's why we do what we do at High Conflict Institute. It's game-changing information. And there's simple skills that we learn, but they really work and can help a lot. So we hope you'll try them and keep listening. Thank you for listening. Next week, we'll be talking about the 4 Fuhgedaboudits, which are really one of the most important things to learn about high conflict situations. And we're getting a lot of feedback from, people who take our trainings and consultations and things that this is really the most helpful thing for them. And it's a little bit different for everyone, but there are 4 main things you have to forget about doing when dealing with a high conflict person or high conflict situation. Otherwise, you'll get it wrong. So in the meantime, send your questions to podcast@highconflictinstitute.com or submit them to highconflictinstitute.com/podcast. And please tell all your friends about us. And we'd be really grateful if you'd leave a review wherever you listen to our podcast. Until next episode, keep striving toward the missing piece. It's All Your Fault is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. Music by Wolf Samuels, John Coggins, and Ziv Moran. Find the show notes, and transcripts at truestory.fm or highconflictinstitute.com/podcast. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.